On today's show, the Houston Rockets with a disappointing loss on the road against the Dallas Mavericks. Silver lining, though, Jabari Smith Jr. looked really good for at least one quarter. Why did the Rockets not tap into that success over the remaining 3 quarters of the basketball game? We'll kind of break down what happened against the Mavericks. Plus, we'll revisit some of the best and worst moments from 2022 as we roll into the new year, 2023. All of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA, Mondays host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as Rockets Watch. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets, free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube, where you can help the show out tremendously by commenting anything below. But for today's episode, I want you to tell me your best or your favorite and least favorite moments, best and worst moments, whatever, from 2022. That could go all the way back to last season. We have an entire year to pick from. Best and worst moments, standout, memories, all of that. Let me know in the YouTube comments. I read each and every one of those every single day. Now, today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline is where the game starts. Today's episode, we'll talk a little bit about the disappointing loss against the Dallas Mavericks. Some silver linings from that game. Jabari Smith Jr. really good early in that one. Jalen Green, solid night. KPJ started out, pretty good and then kind of waned a little. I don't know. We'll revisit the storylines from that game, but it was a disappointing loss. And then we'll also dive into, as inspired by weekly co-host Ben Dubose, who is not here today, but put out an excellent podcast with his co-host Paolo Alves over at The Logger Line, kind of revisiting the best and worst moments from 2022 for your Houston Rockets. So inspired by that, I figured I would also share my favorite, best and worst moments, best game, all that stuff we're looking forward to seeing in 2023, all of that a little bit later on in the show. But let's start with, unfortunately, the Dallas Mavericks game. And you know what? This game was kind of disappointing, and it was so disappointing that I wound up actually having to dig up an old soundbite from none other than Houston Rockets legend John Wall, who could perfectly sum up this game.
Shit, his ass. Terrible.
It was not great. It started out like the first quarter, was good, competitive first quarter, and then things kind of, train came off the rails, whatever, in the second, and, at no point did it feel like the Rockets were fighting their way back into this game. It was the big silver lining from this game, though, is Jabari Smith Jr. looked really good in that first quarter. And you got a glimpse of this is what it could look like if the Rockets maybe prioritized him or utilized him and played to his strengths more than they currently do. Because right now, let's face it, Jabari Smith Jr. is utilized as a spot-up shooter. That's basically what his role is on this Rockets team. And that's not the end of the world, right? There's a lot of dynamic creators, a lot of guys who can, get him the ball and get him wide open shots. But in this Dallas Mavericks game, we saw Jabari Smith Jr. go off in the first quarter for 14 points on 6 of 7 shooting. Missed his only three-pointer, was 6 of 6 inside the three-point line. And they were all middies. He was cooking in the mid-range. And it's because the Dallas Mavericks were, deploying a zone to try and slow down the Rockets. And we know that this Rockets team has struggled beating zone defenses this season. And how did they answer the Dallas Mavericks zone? They put Jabari in the middle of the floor, and Jabari was able to just shoot over the top of the zone from the mid-range. And he was cooking. Jabari had 14 points at the end of the first quarter. Luka Doncic had 14 points at the end of the first quarter. He was point for point with Luka by the end of the first. I thought Jabari was going for 30. And I hate it because in Rockets Watch, we're watching this game, and I called it. I said, you know what? It's great that he went off in the first quarter He's going to get iced out the rest of the game. And that's basically what happened. He got 7 shot attempts in the first quarter. He only had 6 shot attempts the rest of the game. Like, what are we doing here? I don't. And at no point over the remaining 3 quarters did the Rockets make it a point to try and get Jabari back into the mid post. I think he got one more, if memory serves, he got one more mid post shot the rest of the game, or a mid post touch. And that was it, right? And we know that that's an area that Jabari can be successful in, right? He was successful in that area in college. And we know that at the NBA level, 2-pointers, long twos, whatever, mid-range is not a good shot. It's not analytically, it's not a good shot unless you are a good mid-range shooter. I think Jabari has the shooting ability and the skill set to be an above average mid-range shooter. It's just not something that the Rockets to this point have really looked to tap into. But even after seeing how good he was in that first quarter, you would think that the coaching staff or that like KPJ and Jalen would recognize it on the floor and be like, oh, we need to get Jabari the ball like back in the mid post because he is on fire, right? So really disappointing, remaining 3 quarters, right? After an exciting first quarter, seeing Jabari go off, go toe-to-toe with Luka as far as points are concerned. And then, so he was 6 of 7 in the first quarter. He went 1 for 6 the rest of the game. He missed all 4 of his 3-pointers. He was cooking in the mid-range, but this happens way too frequently where we see a player who gets going, right? We've seen this a lot this season with Jalen, right? Where Jalen will get going, and then the team as a whole, the coaching staff, whoever you want to pin the blame on, does not recognize that XYZ player has it going, has the hot hand, and they completely get away from it, right? So, silver lining is that we saw a glimpse of what Jabari Smith Jr. can be and could be, right, as a player. He doesn't, right? We know that Jabari doesn't have this like crazy fancy handle. We know that he kind of struggles to create his own shot. But at the same time, if you put him in positions where he doesn't have to do that, right? If you give him the ball at the mid post and allow him to just face up, kind of be in that triple threat stance, maybe take one or 2 quick dribbles and then elevate for a shot, or just he's in triple threat and he just elevates over the defense without even having to put the ball on the floor, that's where he can be successful. And that's where I'd like to see Coach Silas and this team, the coaching staff, utilize him a bit more. And it's just really, it's kind of an anomaly as to why they didn't go back to that throughout the rest of the game, right? And granted, those looks that he was getting in the first quarter were predicated on the Mavericks running a zone defense. And they did run some more zone as the game went on. It's not like the Mavericks went completely away from the zone, but you could still get Jabari the ball in the mid post, even if a team is running man-to-man defense. Like, that's fine. Just get him the ball at the mid post and let him go one-on-one with his man right there, right? Space everybody out away from him, or maybe even run some high-low action with Jabari and Sengun to get both of those guys a little bit more involved in the offense rather than just having this, like, frustratingly guard-heavy, perimeter-oriented offense where you're just swinging the ball side to side and you're banking on somebody beating another guy off the dribble to collapse the defense. Get some different looks, right? Kind of add some layers, add some variation to the offense. That's what I'm begging for out of this Rockets coaching staff and out of Steven Silas. Is, you have different guys. You have Sengun, you have Jabari, you have different guys who can be utilized in different ways and some creative ways to, right, unlock some more for your offense. So really encouraging first quarter from Jabari Smith Jr., and then it kind of all went downhill after that. I do want to talk about Alperen Sengun and just kind of like, this is like a really weird stretch of 3 games for him, right? From how well he played in the Bulls game to then struggling against the Celtics and not being utilized properly, and then to this game in the against the Mavericks where he was getting whistled for some of the most like atrocious whistles that I've seen this season so far. Referees really do hate Alperen Sengun. Want to talk about that, his play in this game, as well as some other thoughts from this one. But first, we're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at NHTSA. Look, it can happen really easily, right? Maybe you're out with friends or some coworkers after work, happy hour. You're putting back a few drinks, and a few becomes a few too many, right? And it's time to wrap up, time to head home. And you think for a split second, you're like, yeah, let me call a ride, call a friend, or call a rideshare service, But then you realize you're like, no, I'm good, right? I can drive. Maybe you live nearby, you can make it home okay. You're making all these excuses in your head. What are the odds that you'll actually get pulled over, right? Slim. And even if you do get pulled over, right, what's the worst that could happen? You lose your license, maybe you lose your job, you total your car, maybe you kill someone. It only takes one mistake to change your life or somebody else's forever. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. Drive sober or get pulled over. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, we talk about, for much of the season, it's felt like the Rockets have had only a few, maybe a handful, maybe it's more than a handful now. It's probably up to like 5 or 6 games that have been really disappointing given the context of the game and how things played out. This Mavs game felt really wacky because, one, the Rockets were, competitive in the last game in Houston against the Mavericks before things derailed in the fourth quarter. And it felt like the energy and the body language was bad this game. It really did. Like, there were plays, guys were frustrated, not getting back in transition. Mavericks just completely destroyed the Rockets in transition, 25-5. Fast break points. So Mavs plus 20 on fast break scoring. And this is a Rockets team, right, where, like, I don't know where that message got, like, lost in translation or something, but, like, media day, they talked about, we're going to be running guys out of the gym, and we're fast, and we're an electric young team, and we want to be, like a track meet every night, right? Get out and run it. And that has not happened, like, at all this season. Like, this Rockets team willingly walks the ball up way too often. They take forever to get into their offensive sets, and it's like, why? You're a young team. You've got young, fresh legs. Why are you not absolutely looking to push the pace at every opportunity that you can? Because that's probably one of the few advantages you have against almost any other team in the league, being one of the youngest teams in the league, is pushing the pace, right? Making other teams tired because they're having to chase you in transition. And then on top of that, you give yourself the added benefit of preventing, or not allowing another team, I should say, to set up their half-court defense, right? This Rockets team playing in the half-court, they struggle, right? Their half-court offense is not great. But transition offense is where you're able to get those easy opportunities, right? It's where you're able to attack a defense that isn't set. It's where guys who can get going downhill, like Jalen, like Kevin, right? They're able to attack before the defense can load up to really try and wall off some of those driving lanes, or, build a wall around the rim, and just all of that. So it really is perplexing why they don't try to get out and run more in transition. And then on the flip side, right, letting the Mavericks get out in transition the way that they did so often in this game. Like, there was just a lot of possessions where, it feels like there's this, and Silas spoke about this after the game, talking about it just, guys are in between, right? Because this Rockets team does do a good job rebounding the ball, and they have guys that do look to crash and attack the offensive glass, which can be good. But if you've got too many guys crashing the offensive glass, then you don't have enough guys getting back, especially if you don't actually get the offensive rebound. And then on top of that, it's like that balancing act between, do you crash the glass? Do you get back in transition? But there's guys who are not doing either, right? There's guys who are stuck in no man's land, right? You either have to be actively crashing the glass or getting back in transition. And traditionally, right, it's like your guards who need to be the guys who are the first guys back, with the exception of, right, if Jalen or Kevin drive, they get downhill and they get to the bucket and maybe they miss a layup or something and they go crash into the floor. That's always unfortunate because you're kind of igniting like a 5-on-4 fast break, especially if one of your guards, one of your perimeter guys, tumbles and hits the deck. Then yeah, you're going to give an advantage to the opposing team. Those moments are always really frustrating. But there was, a possession in this game where it's like, body language wise, it was really bad. There were a couple of moments, like Sengun had a moment where he got an offensive rebound and he had KPJ like wide open on the wing, and it looked like he saw him, but but then chose not to kick the ball out to him, whatever. And KPJ, had his arms up, like pass me, and then just threw his arms down to his side when the ball didn't come his way. He had another one, elsewhere in the game where he didn't get the kick out pass and, was really frustrated about it. Mavericks got the ball, got the rebound, and Luka started pushing it in transition. And KPJ wasn't by the time Luka kicked the ball ahead, KPJ wasn't even across half court, right? He was sulking back on the other side of the floor. He was upset about the way that the previous possession had gone. And there's a lot of moments like that. Like there's a lot of just really disappointing moments where like the effort or the intensity is not there. Jalen had a defensive possession where he blew the defensive coverage. He was closing out on a 3-point shooter on Dinwiddie, I believe, closing out on Dinwiddie, just completely sailed past him. And then Dinwiddie like took a dribble, or reloaded like he was going to shoot the 3. And then Jalen didn't even try to get back in the picture to contest the 3-pointer. It was just like, just kind of, gave up to the idea like, okay, I went past him, he's going to shoot the shot. Didn't recover to get back in. Dinwiddie passed the ball, cut back into the paint, cut to the other side of the floor. Jalen was completely lost, like didn't go to pick him up. And then the possession just completely like unraveled to where Christian Wood got an easy dunk at the rim. And the dunk that Christian Wood got at the rim was because Spencer Dinwiddie was wide open to the 3-point line. Somebody else, I believe it was Sengun, had to rush to try and close out at Dinwiddie. And then it opened up Christian Wood wide open to the paint. And Jalen was like stuck in no man's land, like in the middle of all of this. And those moments are just so frustrating because you're like, I can live with mistakes being made because, these guys are learning and they're trying and they're putting their best foot forward, but they're just, they're messing up a defensive scheme or they're not reading things properly. That's one thing, right? But like effort-wise, like effort is inexcusable, right? If you are having plays like the KPJ plays I highlighted, or like the Jalen plays that I highlight where you just kind of give up on a possession, those to me are inexcusable. Those are the ones where I would love to see Steven Silas call a timeout, grab that guy by his shoulder and say, like, dude, like, what are you doing, right? Like, this is not cool. Go sit on the bench, right? Like, that effort is inexcusable because to me, that is the number one thing for a young team is you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have moments where, momentary lapses, mistakes are going to be made. That's fine. But when the effort starts boiling over to a point where the body language looks bad, where guys aren't trying, where they're giving up on possessions, that's when you're in like red alert, DEFCON 5, like, okay, you're in danger of like losing the locker room. Guys aren't playing hard for you anymore, like all that mess. And I do worry that we're seeing an increasing trend of that in some of these kind of over the course of like this month of December, like some of the really bad losses that the Rockets have had this month. I feel like we're seeing that recurring trend of the bad body language, the, bad effort, bad starts to games, like all that kind of stuff. And that needs to be addressed quickly rather than letting it fester and then becoming this thing where, guys start mentally checking out. They start playing selfishly. They're not getting other guys involved. And it's crazy how you can go from playing so well in that first game against the Bulls on this road trip to then like the effort level that was on display against the Mavericks. It's like you're watching two different basketball teams. The other point I wanted to bring up from this one was Alperen Sengun. This is a weird 3-game stretch for him, arguably his best game of the season against the Bulls, and then gets completely taken out of the game against the Celtics because credit to the Celtics defense. They were switching everything. They made it hard, but then the Rockets made absolutely zero attempt after the first quarter to try and get him the basketball. It's like they just conceded to, okay, well, the Celtics are switching everything, and we're not going to try to get the entry pass to LP because the team is bad at throwing entry passes, and we're just going to let Marcus Smart bully Sengun. Very frustrating for that game. And then this one against the Mavericks, LP was in foul trouble, and I understand that. And he was in foul trouble throughout the majority of this game, but LP didn't even play the second half, right? Or like played very little. He played like 4 minutes in the second half, right? So not only did he get minimal first half minutes because the Rockets are still hell bent on this idea of, the 3-man center rotation with, Bruno and Garuba. But at some point, right, like throw LP back in at the top of the fourth quarter, right? Like he's in foul trouble, sure, whatever. Like if you're going to make a run for it, if you're going to try and like get yourself back, just put him back in. So what if he fouls out? You got 2 other centers on the bench. Like what's the point of just letting him sit on the bench with 5 fouls and just have no impact on the game rather than, all right, it's fourth quarter time, LP, get out there, do your thing. And if you foul out, you foul out, whatever. Like, and I believe there's a lesson that can be learned by playing with 5 fouls, because if you're able to play with 5 fouls, think about how LP did. I want to say it was late in the game against the Bucks, right? Where he had the 5 fouls and he was playing some really quality defense late with the 5 fouls. Maybe I'm mistaken. Maybe it wasn't the Bucks game. I'm not going to dig it up right now, but there was a game, not so long ago where Alpy had the 5 fouls. He was playing, late in the game with the 5 fouls, and he was doing a good job defensively, even though he had the 5 fouls. So there's something that could be learned from that, and experience, that could be beneficial to him, but I digress. They didn't even bother going back to it or trying to attempt to go back to it. So it's so weird. Just again, you have the first quarter where Jabari looks so good, and then you don't go back to him the rest of the game. You have this Bulls game where Alp looks incredible, and then you basically just zero commitment to trying to, do that again, trying to replicate that success against the Celtics or against the Mavericks. It's confusing. It's confusing coaching. I really can't wrap my head around it, but I do want to give a shout out here before moving on from the Mavericks game. Usman Garuba continues to he puts in the work when he's out there. He hustles. He's probably the best screen setter of all the Rockets bigs. In fact, I won't even say probably. He is the best screen setter of all the Rockets bigs. In his 20 minutes that he played in this game, he led all the centers on the team with 20 minutes first off, because he wound up playing the garbage time. But he would have probably finished around the same amount of minutes as Sengun regardless. 9 points, 9 boards, 1 assist, 2 steals in 20 minutes of play. Was 4 or 5 from the floor, 1 of 2 from 3. And in this game, in a game where Luka Doncic was scoring at will, had 35 points, 12 boards, 13 assists. First off, there was that incident where Garuba contested Luka at the rim and then tripped over him, and it looked like he accidentally kicked Luka in the head and made contact with Luka, and Luka was furious after this, right? Was got teed up, was arguing with the officials. One, what do you want that to be called, right? That's incidental contact. Guys trip over each other all the time. It's unfortunate that Garuba kicked Luka in the head, that the back of his heel made contact with Luka's head. I get that, but that's not anybody's fault. Guys tumble over each other all the time. You catch a stray elbow, you get a hand to the face, whatever. It's incidental contact at best. So I don't know why Luka was so in his feelings about it, but Garuba, I think, played the best individual one-on-one defense on Luka in this game of any player, in a Houston Rockets jersey. He was switched out on the perimeter. He was, pressing him, up on the ball. He was, forcing him into some really difficult shots. And Luka was hitting some of them because it's Luka Doncic, and he does that, right? Luka's absurd. He's an insanely talented player. He's going to be a year in, year out MVP candidate. But it was really nice to see Garuba kind of pressuring him, providing that resistance. And there were even some moments, Jabari had some good contests on him. It's just, Luka just does what he wants to do on the court. And when it's a player that good, all you can do is try to make them uncomfortable, and you live with the results. What you don't want to do is give him, wide open opportunities that are just where you're spoon feeding him buckets. And I did think that the Rockets defensively through portions of this game did make Luka, hit some really tough shots. They just had defensive collapses elsewhere, especially in transition, losing track of guys, letting them get out on the fast break and giving up some wide open buckets like that. But disappointing game. Rockets hung some points at the free throw line. The defense was inadequate throughout main stretches of this game. Eric Gordon was abysmal. Price is going down on EG, 0 of 7 shooting from the floor. All 4 of his points came at the free throw line, and the Rockets as a team, yeah, they were bad from the free throw line. 26 of 37, 70%. That's got to be better. Very forgettable game for the Houston Rockets. So with that, also, you know what? I don't know if I want to give a Locked On Rockets player of the game. Maybe it's a toss-up between Jabari for the first quarter and Garuba just for the game as a whole. Yeah, I don't know. I'm torn on those two guys, but with that, coming up, I do want to talk about some of the best and worst moments from 2022. We'll take a quick trip down memory lane to wrap this thing up. Final podcast heading into the new year. We're going to get there, but first, today's episode is brought to you by Rocket Money. Say goodbye to last year's outdated, disorganized methods of managing your money and say hello to Rocket Money, the better way to hack your finances in 2023. Rocket Money, formerly known as Truebill, is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel all of your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower your bills all in one place. Over 80% of people have subscriptions that they forgot about. Look, I hate to admit it, but it's happened to me before, right? Where you're sifting through your credit card statement, and you're like, oh crap, that bill hit again, right? And then you're like, okay, I got to go cancel. And then you forget, right? It's, maybe it's a streaming service that you got for just that one show, or it's a free trial that you forgot to cancel. It's happened to all of us, right? I hate to admit it, but it's happened to all of us. Rocket Money will quickly and easily identify your subscriptions for you so you can stop paying for the ones that you don't want or need anymore. Stop throwing your money away, cancel unwanted subscriptions, and manage your expenses the easy way by going to rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba, rocketmoney.com/lockedonnba. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Final podcast of the year 2022. And man, it's been a crazy year for the Rockets. A lot of good, a lot of bad, a lot of in between. So, inspired by our weekly co-host Ben Dubose over at his podcast, The Logger Line, which you should absolutely go check out. Go subscribe to The Logger Line wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to revisit, or I'll always share some of my best and worst from 2022, as well as a couple, predictions, expectations, whatever for 2023. And I want to hear yours, right? So, I'm going to lay out a few categories here and, share my thoughts. And then I want to hear your thoughts in the YouTube comments. So go share, your best and worst from 2022 as well. For me, we'll start with the best game of 2022. And this was actually a really hard one for me because I came away and, games from last season are on the table for sure. So, I could have picked any number of the games from, the second half of last season. I think for me, the best game probably still comes down to that Bucks win, because in that Bucks win, right, the reason that win felt so special is because you saw the two kind of cornerstone guys getting it done in that game. You saw Jalen Green offensively really carrying the offensive load for the Rockets. And then defensively, you saw Jabari Smith Jr. and you really saw, yeah, this is how this guy can be, a defensive anchor, right? Him shutting down and dealing with Giannis and forcing Giannis into some a really, really bad game, all of that. You saw the impact that he could have. Even though offensively he had a bad game, you saw just how impactful he could be as a defender and how he's, one day Jabari Smith Jr. is going to be one of the best players on a championship contender. I don't know if he's ever going to be the number one guy on a championship contender, but I think given his skill set, there's a very distinct possibility that he could be the best player on a championship contender one day. Don't know if he'll ever be the number one option on a contender, but we'll see. We'll see how his offensive bag develops over the years, all of that. But that probably has to be my best game of 2022. And best moment kind of goes hand in hand with that. My personal best moment for 2022, drafting Jabari Smith Jr., right? Because he was the guy throughout the entire pre-draft cycle. When I sat down and I really started, digging in on all the top prospects, and I was really sold on what Jabari could be as an NBA player. I was sold on the impact that he would have, his long-term impact on an organization. Of course, Paolo Banchero looks fantastic, right? He is the runaway favorite for Rookie of the Year this season, and he's going to have an incredible NBA career. Absolutely. I'm not going to disparage Paolo. He's been sensational. But I still think that when we start to revisit these guys from the 2022 draft, 4, 5, 6 years from now, we're going to be looking, at Jabari Smith Jr. thinking, okay, there was these are the reasons that he was the number one guy for so long, right? He's going to have an immense defensive impact on the game. He's already shown flashes of what he can do and what he can be offensively, kind of stepping out of his comfort zone, and that's only going to get better with time. I don't need him to ever develop a Kyrie handle. I don't need him to ever become, even a tier 1 scoring option, 25 plus a game, whatever. He brings you so much. Brings you so much on the defensive end. He brings you, confidence, leadership, all of that. I'm really sold on the fact that when we found out that Banchero went number 1, and then there was that brief moment of fear where I was waiting to see what OKC was going to do. As soon as OKC took Chet Holmgren and we knew that Jabari Smith Jr. was going to be a Houston Rocket, I was over the moon. Because even though I'd warmed up to the idea of Paolo Banchero, I never was fully sold on the idea, and I still always had Jabari number 1 on my board. So it's going to be a few years before we're able to start running victory laps or start feeling vindicated about those draft profiles, whatever. But I still think that was probably my personal favorite or best moment from 2022. Worst moment probably still has to go to the Christian Wood, Kevin Porter Jr. incident, which again, I think I shoulder most of that blame on Christian Wood much more than Kevin Porter Jr. But that moment, those two do share in that moment, right? Where Kevin Porter Jr. left at halftime. Christian Wood refused to check back into the game. All of that. That was a crappy moment. That was an organizational low that we hadn't really experienced since the whole, like, I think probably since like the James Harden, press conference where he stormed out. Like that was bad. Everybody in the NBA was talking about it. There were question marks about KPJ and Christian Wood's future. And then credit to Stephen Silas, he distanced those two incidents from each other. He was like, they're getting lumped in together when I think they're two very separate incidents. And credit to KPJ, right? Because he was pissed that he didn't get to, wasn't going to get back in the game to try and compete. I think the incidents were, mistakenly lumped together, but that was probably the lowest low from 2022. And then it was followed up by one of the highest highs, honorable mention, KPJ getting suspended the following game, and then the next game where he was back, hitting the game winner against the Washington Wizards. That was a cool moment and a great way to kind of, all right, you're back. This is what you can do. This is the trust that the organization has in you, all of that. So kind of a little roller coaster series, roller coaster week, I guess, for the Rockets back when that happened. Most improved player. I was kind of torn on this one, but I think I have to give it to Alperen Sengun. I think it's the only one that makes sense on this Rockets team. Because when you look at most improved player, right, you're going to have to look at guys who are around, the previous year, who have improved this season. And I don't know how you don't give that to Alperen Sengun. He has improved. He's improved his scoring, his scoring output, his efficiency is up, his free throw shooting is up, his rebounding, his numbers across the entire board are up, right? And he's doing it all despite the fact that he's not really, to this point been made a focal point of what the Rockets are trying to do. He has answered what they've asked him to do, which is basically be a rim running big, even though that's not necessarily his strengths as a basketball player. He has answered that. He's done that. And in the moments where he's been able to kind of showcase what he can be, we've seen the highs, right? We saw it against the Bulls. We see how good this kid can be. And I still, to this point, I'm like, look, if Alperen Sengun was playing for the San Antonio Spurs or the OKC Thunder or something, he'd be putting up like 22 and 10 every single night with ease. But because this organization doesn't want to prioritize him, at least to this point, because the priority is placed on the guards and they are a perimeter-oriented offense, all of that, Sengun just doesn't get the reps to be as effective as I think he can be. And it's really unfortunate to see a kid with this much talent be kind of pigeonholed by the coaching staff, by the organization into a certain role. But maybe it's something that has to happen. The fact that we've seen that level of production, despite the fact that he's not being made a focal point, gives me hope that somewhere further down the line, maybe with a fresh look at things, whatever, from either the coaching staff or a different front office that wants to place different expectations on the organization, what have you. I hope that we don't see the Rockets fumble Alp by moving on from him, trading him to a different organization, whatever. And then you look back on this like years from now and you're like, oh, wow. Oklahoma City gift wrapped the Rockets, this super talented young star, and they fumbled on him. And now he's with another organization and he looks incredible because they're actually utilizing him properly. That would be like the ultimate, now that I think about it, that would be like the ultimate karmic retribution, right? For Daryl Morey swindling the Thunder all those years ago and James Harden becoming a perennial MVP candidate. Because you look back on that trade and you're like, how did the Thunder pass up on this guy? And now we're at the inverse of that, where the Thunder did it again. They fumbled, they traded their pick, gave Alperen Sengun to the Houston Rockets, and now the Rockets aren't utilizing this kid who has all this talent in the world. And if they wind up passing on him, if they wind up moving on from him, trading him, letting him go, whatever, and he never realizes his full potential in Houston, but then goes to another team and becomes a star, that would be the karmic retribution for, James Harden. That would be the price that you'd pay, and you'd look back on that and be like, damn, that, basketball gods always get their way, huh? But yeah, I'm going to give it to Alp. I think he's the most improved player to this point of the season, of the calendar year, I should say. Most disappointing player. I feel like there's only one answer here.
You know what? I don't want to talk about Daishen Nix. I just don't understand it. I don't know what's going on. And it's a lot of Daishen Nix.
Look, I had high hopes for Daishen Nix. I really did. I think he's got good basketball IQ. I think he does have good court vision. I think he's got a lot of potential, but the Rockets have now moved on from him. Tate Washington is now, it looks like the new backup point guard of the future for the Rockets. He's been the backup point guard these last few games. Looks like Jae'Sean is now, out of the rotation. This tracks with what I thought was going to happen this summer, right? Is like, okay, Jae'Sean needed, about quarter of the season, half the season, whatever stretch of games you were willing to commit to him to see if he could be something more, right? And unfortunately, he just didn't take advantage of the one area that Jae'Sean improved in is he became a better spot-up three-point shooter, right? Three-point percentage was significantly better, but he had lots of highs and lows as far as his ability to orchestrate an offense, and he just doesn't put any pressure on the defense, right? Jae'Sean as a point guard puts absolutely zero pressure on the opposing defense, and it's unfortunate because when he does put pressure on the defense, when he does get going downhill, all he has is the ability to get to the bucket and draw a foul. And he's not even a great finisher at the rim, unfortunately, even though he's got good size, a good NBA body to be a good finisher, isn't really able to finish well through contact, all of that. And then he's a bad free throw shooter. So just all in all, Jae'Sean was given, I think, a fair shake, a fair opportunity to try and carve out a permanent spot on this Rockets roster. They gave him about a quarter of the season to see what he could do as the backup point guard. And it seems like now they've moved on from him. So I'm going to have to say most disappointing player of 2022 goes to Jae'Sean, unfortunately. And then let's take a look. We'll do a couple predictions here for 2022. And I'm going to say, we'll start with most improved player. How's that? I think most improved is going to be Jabari. I think Jabari is going to, as the season progresses, I think Jabari is going to continue to settle in. We've seen that three-point shot kind of come and go, and I think that over time is going to level out to get to a consistent point where you're just like, okay, Jabari is reliably hitting threes, right? He's a reliable 40-ish% three-point shooter. We saw that 10-game stretch where he was shooting close to 50% from three, and now his three-point percentage is back in the tank. So the up and downs, you expect that out of a rookie, right? I think as the season moves along, he's going to level out as a three-point shooter. Things will continue to slow down for him where he's going to continue to be more of an impact player defensively. The rebounding numbers are encouraging, all of it. And then hopefully, right, if the coaching staff can continue to find ways to kind of cater to him, play to his strengths at times, maybe getting him the ball in the mid-post area a little bit, some high-low action with Alperen Sengun to make life easier for both of those guys where they can feed off of each other. If they can do things like that, then I'm really optimistic about what we're going to see out of Jabari in 2023. So I'm going to pick him as my most improved player for the rest of the season. And then best moment as my prediction for 2023. I'm going to call it right now. Rockets getting the number 1 overall pick in the draft lottery. Hence, Victor Wembanyama. That's what I'm I feel it in my bones, guys. I feel it in my bones. They got the number 2 pick. They got the number 3 pick. I'm feeling it. They're not going to, how about this? They're not going to finish with the worst record this season, so they will not be the worst team in the NBA, but they will walk away with the number 1 overall pick. Calling that right now. So let's say, maybe they finish 3rd or 4th worst record, and, I think 3rd is the sweet spot, right? 3rd, you still have a 14% chance at the number 1 overall pick. So I'm calling it right now. Rockets will not finish with the worst record, but they will win the Wemby sweepstakes and walk away with the number 1 overall selection. That is my prediction for the best moment of 2023. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments. Break it down for me. Give me your best game, best moment, worst moment, most improved player, most disappointing player, all of those from 2022. And if you want to, in addition to that, you can share your predictions for 2023. Let me know in the YouTube comments. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a very happy new year. And as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here, Locked on Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.